Hey guys, welcome back to the Butterfly Effect podcast. Jack and I have just finished the first part of House of Ashes. So we've waited for this game for a while. We're pretty excited. We finally got stuck in. Um, and yeah, no, honestly, the game so far, for myself anyway, I'm thinking it holds up. Like I say, a lot's going to depend on how they end it. But so far, I'm enjoying it. And as always with Supermassive, they're always tweaking things as we go. And something I noticed about this game, and it's something you mentioned before that would happen, is that they have difficulty settings now. So before we get started, Jack, what difficulty did you decide to put your game on?
So I chose challenging. So I suppose you could look at that as the medium difficulty. I didn't want to do the forgiving one because I felt like that would be too easy. I didn't want to do the hardest difficulty because I think that, it could be ridiculously hard to keep them all alive. So I was like, for now, my first playthrough, I'll go with challenging. But what about you?
Exact same thoughts, mate. So yeah, like you said, Little Hope probably too easy, and it felt that anyone that was killed off was possibly by choices, not by quick time events. So I wanted a lot more of a challenge, but yeah, I didn't want my first playthrough to be everyone dies, with it just being me struggling to hit the X button by like a fraction because all of them were like that. So I thought I'd go down the middle, and depending on how easy I found it, I'd change it afterwards on a second playthrough perhaps. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'm finding the difficulty quite good though, because the quick time events I seem to be scraping by. So I'm just narrowly getting them. So I can't even imagine what the hardest difficulty would be like. I'll probably get a lot of people killed.
yeah, and I think I'll tell you the one that I'm struggling on the most. It's, the one where you have to like spam the button. They're the
Oh
ones
yeah,
I'm
same.
closest to failing. Like the ones we've just got to hit it once, I'm pretty much getting instantly. But
Yeah, I
I'm
swear to God, I
it's
nearly
like,
killed Salim with one of those.
yeah, yeah. All right, good stuff. Well, I feel like we've got a lot to cover in this episode. It was a very lengthy part. It was probably half an hour longer than what I actually expected. Um,
Yeah, definitely. I saw when we both started it, and yeah, it was just there were many scenes where I was like, it's gonna come to the curator scene, and then it just carried on and carried on. Not that I'm complaining. I just hope this part two and three aren't like really short to compensate, but we'll have to see. So obviously a lot to cover. Where should we start? The settings, the intro, perhaps?
yeah, I think the intro would be a good start. I mean, what are your initial thoughts on it, sort of in comparison to the intro for Man of Medan and Little Hope?
Yeah, very good actually. The setting is really breathtaking. Yeah, the it's just beautiful to look at, really, isn't it? And obviously, one of the first things I'm sure you noticed as well, and it's the point we covered in the first part, the faces being reused. So
Yeah,
obviously, Junior and Olsen from Man of Medan are your main two characters here. One thing I will briefly say, because I don't want to, overplay, I sound like a broken record. But I'm because of all the faces we're seeing in this episode that are in previous ones, I'm at the point now where it's clearly intentional. Um, if it happens less, it becomes down to lazy writing and accidental. But now it's clearly deliberate. It's like American Horror Story style, and I think I'm coming to accept it a lot more now. But yeah, you've obviously got these two characters, and yeah, the choices at the start are actually really difficult. So you've got the one with the daughter.
yeah.
So what did you do for that one then? You're ordered to kill who possibly is your daughter.
I chose not to. And then that then follows up. She sort of then tries to kill you. I was like, hey, like, what are you doing? I just saved your life. Um, and then she starts to run away, doesn't she? And it gives you the option to throw the spear into her back or not. At that point, the black bar come across the screen and it said you can choose not to do something. And I was sort of thinking, yeah, I'm not gonna kill her. I don't know if this is gonna impact the game or not, but I chose not to. Did you do the same?
Yeah, exact same. So obviously she dies anyway, and then how much of an impact that will have because we know what happens next. A big war happens, and later on, as the prisoner, you come out to find the king dead. But
Yeah,
yeah, so obviously, yeah, the war scene happens, and a big part of it is Balatu working with, I forget the other person's name now, the person who was junior in Man of Medan, the
yeah,
prisoner basically. You're
yeah,
working together, and I assume that's going to be a theme throughout. But I really enjoyed these scenes actually, seeing two enemies coming against a mutual villain. Um, but yeah, so there's another big choice as well where you can choose to betray this character. So which one did you do on this one?
no, I didn't. I chose to fight with him, which is funny because I know I said in the last episode, I hope they don't go too cheesy too quickly. As soon as there's an external threat, everyone bands together. But I think they handled it quite nicely actually, and I ended up picking to fight with him. Obviously, it maybe it does matter, maybe it doesn't, but yeah, I chose to fight with. I've got an achievement for it as well, so I'm off the mark
Yeah,
in that sense, which is always
same
good.
here. And if you press R1 or is it in your case is it LB or RB, isn't it? You obviously look at the butterfly effects, and I did have a look at it, and it did say Balatu was the last to survive in the tomb. Um, Obviously those choices wouldn't be posted unless they had relevance. So maybe if you betray the prisoner, maybe you die first and then the other guy dies second, and maybe that has an effect on the story. I'm really unsure actually, but that could have an effect later on. So it'll be really interesting to revisit that butterfly effect and see what comes of it.
Yeah, and I was going to say something that we've sort of missed is they've taken away the butterfly sort of thing from Until Dawn, haven't they? They've started using crows
They have, haven't they?
as the animation for when like a serious decision's been made, which I noticed. But did you spot the uh, the semi sort of Game of Thrones esque part of that introduction where you had the soldiers with the shields and the spears coming through, and you had like all these people charging at them, sort of thing. It just reminded me of an episode in Game of Thrones. Um,
Oh, I mean, it obviously reminded me of a lot of like, old mythology, wartime films and battles that I've seen, but not particularly Game of Thrones. But yeah, it's interesting that you put it that way.
yeah, I suppose it's probably that's what I'm most related to in terms of that time period and whatnot. But yeah, I thought that was a nice touch. Um, so what do you make of the visuals in this game? You're playing on a PS4, right?
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of the settings and stuff, beautiful. That's one thing I really like about super massive games. For example, if you take any other game studio and let's take the Assassin's Creed games, for example. And I know there's a lot of variety, but especially in the early days, they did two Renaissance games and then almost like an Ottoman game, and the settings were very similar. Super massive, obviously, in short spaces of time, completely make different settings. So we've had a ghost ship, we've had Salem witch trials, which has a period in the 1600s or whatever it is. And now we've got like the Akkadian empires, and then it switches forward to this 2003 Iraqi war. um yeah, and there's just a lot of different settings, and it's so nice to just not be in the same place for too long. We're experiencing loads, and I don't know what game 4 and 5 is going to be, but it makes me realize there could be endless possibilities. Like we could be pirates soon, we could be ninjas, it could be set in Asia. We really don't know. And even things such as the Arabic language that you hear in it, I believe it is anyway. I could be vastly wrong there, but yeah, there's different languages in it, all this different mythology that's around, and it's really eye catching. I'm not sure if you felt the same way.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. I mean, variety is the spice of life, isn't it? It is just so refreshing to see. We've sort of gone from a dark, moody, foggy climate in Little Hope. We're now sort of in a hot desert. It's stuffy. It's underground. And obviously, previous was sort of on a ghost ship where it was raining and windy and stuff. So they have done that really well. And I think in terms of the graphics themselves, they seem very similar to what was on Man of Medan, Little Hope. You know, they're good graphics. Obviously, I'm playing on the Xbox One, so it's not next gen. But I did see yesterday on the Dark Pictures Facebook page or Supermassive Facebook page that they put a launch trailer out for the game, and it had the curator in it. And honestly, the graphics looked phenomenal. So I'm assuming that that's on PS5 and Xbox Series X. But it did look fantastic. I've got to say. So whoever's playing on that platform has definitely got a treat.
Yeah, no, that's maybe we were on the wrong consoles. We should have bought the later ones.
Yeah,
Something as well that I noticed, even the settings within this game, there's so many because you have the old style intro, then you have the American soldiers where it's all modern and there's their laptops and their gear everywhere. Um, and even you have the side from the Iraqi soldiers where it's a little more run down, for example, but they've got their stories going on. And then the game obviously completely changes when they fall through the hole and they're in the caves, which we could obviously get to a bit later. But I think the game does a very good job of going from absolute daylight the whole time to stuck underground and making everything dark. And before you can see absolutely everything because of the sunlight. And it really makes you feel so isolated when you fall in the hole because you're literally there with flares and flashlights, and that is all you have. And I thought it did such a good job of, like I say, making you feel isolated and really switching the game, from two halves, if you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah. And it's funny because one of the earlier decisions I made was to not call for air support. So
Oh, really? I called for air support.
yeah,
That's interesting. I want to see what difference that makes, actually.
yeah. And I think if you go on like the sort of like if you hit R2 or whatever it is to look at the choices, air support is one of them. So that could come back and bite me on the arse later on. I don't know, but I do remember the colonel saying that within 24 hours we're going to sort of get a rescue team in. So maybe it doesn't matter too much because that's how you're ultimately going to get rescued. But we'll have to see. And what you were saying about getting to that point with the hole, I'm going to do a little bit of nitpicking now because I did say in the last episode about pacing and how pacing for me is going to be important as to how this overall game pans out.
Yeah.
Um, Me personally, I think they could have got to the underground bit a little bit more quickly. And you never know, like this game could be longer than the others and it might balance itself out. But the bit where you have this briefing room, that's fine. And then the helis go over the top and you're thinking, okay, this is looking good. But then you have the whole sequence where it slows down again and you're sort of looking around this farm. I didn't see the relevance of it. Maybe there'll be something later on that ties it all together, but that sort of 10-15 minute bit, I didn't see the point of. I wish they sort of come in, had a conflict, and then went underground.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree personally. One thing I think the game did a good job of was giving the characters a little bit of depth. Because you've got your main playable ones, but you also have some extra ones. But it does, go into them. And obviously, you've got your army tropes. So there's the desk head who doesn't like being on the field. You've got your sleazy character who, is pretty sexist. But there's not a character here. I mean, some are a lot better developed than others. I'll give it that much. But yeah, there's a nice bit of variety, and each one has a different story going on. Unlike,
Yeah,
for example, I'm going to say like Little Hope again. Where you've got maybe a character like Daniel, who's just a kid, where I don't really know what his hobbies are. So that kind of thing. So yeah, like I thought it did a very good job of covering the characters. But yeah, I do agree. The farm bit could have probably been cut a lot shorter, considering that the whole thing was a bust and it just left not much to say for it other than that there was like heroin there. But yeah, no, I do agree. Pacing something that we've talked about before for this game, and it is something they definitely could improve on. But I thought they could have probably put it much later as well, and they didn't. So I like the fact it all came in part one. For example, if they fell in the hole around part two, that would have been an absolute annoyance for me.
Yeah, because I'm factoring in as well. I'm going to be going back to try and get all of the achievements in this game. So I can imagine sort of in future playthroughs me getting to this bit and thinking, oh, I just want to get on with it. I just want to get down into the underground so the game can really begin. But okay, so yeah, I know you sort of touched on characters there, and they, as you say, that it's interesting that there's no real placeholder characters in this, or at least I can think of at the moment. They've all got their own stories going on. But do you have a particular favourite character? Is there a story that you're wanting to see how it develops?
Um, yeah, so one of my favorite characters, possibly Salim, simply because of the difference here. I think it's really fascinating that you've got four playable American characters here, and they have their typical attitude of, oh yeah, a lot of them are like, we have to kill the Iraqis or whatever. And then you have this Salim guy who seems to be this very different Iraqi soldier who actually has depth. He obviously has his son who he's bought a gift for. His son, wants to study mythology at a university in the UK, which I thought was a really interesting avenue to cover.
Yeah.
And you never even see him in it. There's a sad element where he doesn't get to see his son. He gets called out for this mission where he could possibly die as well. And it is very brutal if you think about it in depth. And then there's a really interesting scene with him and Jason, where Jason obviously has the option to shoot the shepherd, and Salim can see it or not.
Oh yeah. I mean, what did you do there?
So that one, controversial, but I actually shot with Jason. I did that. I wouldn't personally do it, but I
Wow.
felt it's something that Jason would do, and I was also quite intrigued to see what would happen. I'm not gonna lie. I know that might be a poor excuse, but interestingly, it said Salim saw it, and I don't know if Jason can die at this exact point. That Salim decided, he said something along the lines of his dialogue of "no more killing," and he like lowered his weapon,
Right. Okay.
and
Well,
then yeah. So did you spare the shepherd when you were Jason?
I did. Yeah, so we might have just encountered the first point in the game where it might not matter because it sounds like the exact same thing happened to me. I chose not to shoot him. Celine was stood behind him, and then Jason slowly turned round and they both put their guns down and Celine said no more killing, and then that's when the ground started to go. So
Oh, okay.
maybe
Maybe it's the case where that always happens, but then later on in the game, Salim gets a chance to kill Jason. On my playthrough, he'll probably do it. On yours, he won't. And that'll be interesting to see.
yeah, possibly.
But
Um
yeah, I really like Salim though. I think there's a lot to him. His intro was really scary because he's by himself. He's stuck down there. He had a really brutal chase scene. But yeah, I really want to see how good his story, how much that develops. So, do you have a favorite character so far?
I do. Salim is one of them, but I'd probably have to edge it to the Colonel. I think is it Eric King.
Eric King,
Um,
yeah.
when I first started playing as him, I got off the helicopter and walked up to Jason, and he says, "Oh, you're early." Um, Usually when I play these games, I sort of try to keep everything nice, but this time I was sort of like, no, you know what? I'm the colonel. Like you shouldn't be, messing around. So I said, look, is the meeting room prepped, sort of thing. And then a massive red arrow comes down for Jason. I was like, oh dear. Um, But then, of course, it then switches, and you see that his wife is clearly cheating on him with this other Marine. So I was like, straight off the bat, I was like, right, I feel sorry for this guy, because they're clearly still married. They've got problems, but it's an interesting dynamic that will come on later on. But I was just feeling quite sympathetic for him. And then later on, in a bit of dialogue, it doesn't last too long, but I assume that he's been in some sort of crash because I think he mentions that he's got like a prosthetic leg or something
Yeah,
like
and
that.
Rachel feels responsible for it, so it was clearly when they were on duty together.
Yeah. So again, I was like, wow, like this guy's having it tough, sort of thing. And it's funny, it got to a point, it was a very romantic sort of bit what they did. I thought it was quite nice. Um, Sort of he was talking to Rachel and he was saying, I've missed you, sort of thing. And at this point, you're playing as Rachel in the game. And as Rachel, I could have turned around and says, oh, we can make it work, sort of thing. Or you can say, there's someone else. But because I sort of felt like, no, you know what, she shouldn't be with him, I actually ended up saying nothing, which obviously he then lashed out and was like, oh, it's obvious there's someone else. But I was like, this guy, he shouldn't, he shouldn't be hanging around with this woman. So, which was interesting later on because obviously there's a segment where you could cut the rope that she's on, and I was sort of looking, I was like, do I, don't I? But in the end,
Yeah.
the good natured part of me was like, no, I'm not going to cut the rope. I'll just sort of let her fall and sort of see what happens from there. So yeah, I'd probably say him. But there was one of the extra characters that died off. I think his name's Merwin. He was,
The Asian one.
yeah, um, obviously like he clearly not a nice person, but as a character in the story, I thought he was really good. And I suppose to say that at this point, I think the writing for these characters has been pretty strong at this point. I enjoyed the banter between the soldiers, the little one-liners and jokes and things. And
Yeah, and the superstitions as well, I enjoyed.
yeah, yeah, and I think of the sort of the not the main characters. I sort of like when he died, I was like, oh, that's a shame, sort of thing. But I suppose they had to get it to a situation where you was literally just playing as the five playable ones.
Yeah, of course. And like I say, it'll be interesting to see the dynamic if Celine joins parties with them, because I imagine that's where you're going to have the foreshadow, or it's going to link heavily with the intro of the game where you've got the guard and the prisoner working together.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
can see that being a similar arc, right?
yeah.
As you mentioned with the choice before, because I didn't cut the rope either, so I was worried for Eric, especially when it gave me two choices. So, for example, if I look back at Man and Medan, I remember when I was underwater with Alex and Julie, and you hear the explosions. I ignored the first one, but it happened a second time, and I felt pressured to go, so I never decompressed.
All right, yeah.
Luckily, I didn't have alcohol, so it didn't affect me, so nothing came of it. However, on this one, it gave me a second option to cut the rope, and I so nearly did. I was so tempted to because I was like, "Is Eric gonna die here?" But I did sort of keep calm and not do that. But the bit before with the option, I did actually make Rachel tell him I wanted to tell the truth. Not necessarily
Yeah,
that I agree with it, because I think Nick so far is the blandest character. I'm not
yeah.
sure what it is about Nick and Alex and that character model, but they always end up being the worst of the five, in my opinion.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, what is it with this character model? He never gets a good rap, like a good character or anything. But
Yeah, I agree.
yeah,
Like, in my opinion, he's like the only weakest one out of the four, because they all have character depth. This guy's literal, his story is he's in a love triangle. That's it. I feel like I want to see more of him.
yeah, and I think I mean, unless there's something I've missed, that's clearly what his story arc is, right? That he's just involved this love triangle. I mean, on the helicopter, there's an opportunity for you to tell Jason about it. Did you do that?
Um, Oh, I can't remember. I remember Jason's the one prodding, and I remember. Oh, I don't think I got it out of him because I asked him what was up, and then when he said no, I'm fine, I think I just sort of, instead of prodding, I said something like, okay, well, I've got your back, so I'm here if you need.
Right. Yeah. See, I chose the opposite. I said, what's up, man? Like, and then he started saying, oh, well, that girl that I was telling you about, and he sort of
Yeah,
just towards her, and then Jason's like, oh God, especially with the Colonel around, you can't, yeah, I'd keep that quiet. So interesting that Jason now knows about this little thing that's going on that could, have repercussions for
yeah.
later. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it's good actually because me and you both have a lot of variety here. So, for example, in mine, Rachel's told Eric about there's another guy. Hasn't said it's Nick, but said there's another guy. So Eric's aware. Obviously, I made Jason kill the shepherd. Salim's seen that. And also, Jason doesn't know about the affair. Well, he does in your story. So we've got three massive changes here. And it should be interesting to see how our stories veer off in different paths now, which is the beauty of these games, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So what are your thoughts on the voice acting in this game? Do you think it's stronger compared to the other games? Is there any moments where you thought, oh, that pulled me out of the game a little bit because it wasn't strong enough?
So far, very strong. So, I'm not too obviously sure. Like, I'm not the best person to ask about it. But like I say, for example, the difference in language I thought was really interesting. How Rachel is like a bit of a translator in there, and also when we look at the Marine lingo, I know I've never been a Marine, so I couldn't comment, but it seems very in line with what you know, you see in movies and TV, and what I imagine it would be kind of like where they're cracking a few jokes at each other. There's a lot of banter, but there's also that really strong sense of camaraderie where they back each other up and they give their lives for each other. Um, for example, as sleazy as Merwin is, he does seem like he cares for everyone. And then there's the medical scene where they get the morphine and they're proper on their feet. Yeah, I think it's covered very well, the voice acting. What did you think yourself?
Yeah, I'd have to agree actually, especially sort of the camaraderie and the banter. And I suppose this is where the writing and the voice acting sort of start to work hand in hand here because I was sort of looking at this and I was thinking like, yeah, this is quite believable at this point. Hopefully it carries on moving forward. So that yeah, there's no qualms and part of the voice acting from me at
Yeah,
this.
the studio have definitely come a long way because I think maybe it might be one flaw I'd give to Until Dawn actually, that a lot of the voice acting and not necessarily the voice acting, but I'd say the script, where like there's a lot of phrases and insults which like you never hear. Things like Mike saying "Holy hot sauce Christmas cake" or something. I'm just like, who says that ever? But yeah, like in these new games with the Dark Pictures, I'm sort of seeing dialogue that seems reasonable and something that would be accurate. But
Yeah.
yeah. So do you have any flaws about the game? So obviously you mentioned a few. Are there any more that stick out to you, for example?
There is. Again, I feel like this is a bit nitpicky because the majority of part one wasn't underground. But I think this it'll be interesting to see how the horror and jump scares element pans as we go forward because I hate to come back to Until Dawn, but it's just the benchmark that I'm going to compare to. But there's moments in that game where you're just walking around in the woods and there's really no threat, but the game makes you think that there could be, and it
Yeah.
tends to be with the music. Um, and obviously, when the jump scares do happen, it takes you by surprise, and then you've got to sort of calm yourself down and then go again. Whereas in this, and I find this a little bit in Little Hope as well, I don't really feel that much dread. I mean, I'm sat there, I've got these sort of Turtle Beach headphones on, I'm ready to be sort of terrified. And I'm just walking around these environments, and I know that nothing's going to come and get me. It's almost like when there's a quick time event, that's when the music ramps up. That's when everything, is 100 miles an hour, but the rest of the time it does feel a bit slow, and I'm not as engaged as much, I would say.
Yeah,
Um,
of course.
so yeah, like is that the same for you or?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would fully agree. I had one flaw in mind where it's towards the end of the chapter, the very last scene of what we just covered. You know, Rachel and Eric are being chased by an Iraqi soldier who comes down. You know, the one who's from the character model of John in Little Hope.
Yeah, yeah,
Dar, I think his name might be.
that's it. Yeah,
And Dar's chasing them, you know, shooting, and he loses them. And then Rachel and Eric have the scene where they have to shimmy across. And then Rachel falls and they have rope and there's yelling. And then Nick comes and they're like yelling out really loud, like, uh, what are they saying? Like, oh yeah, hold on and stuff. And they're being really loud. And then Dar the whole time is probably 10, 15 meters away.
yeah,
And he
yeah,
can't hear or he doesn't go to them or shoot them. And then, you know, Nick comes, he starts talking. And then it later pans to Dart and he's like, oh, I didn't hear anything, and walks in the other direction. And I just thought, like, surely anyone in the studio could have seen that and thought how ridiculous that is. That this bloodthirsty guy's coming after them to kill them. Um, and then there's all this commotion, and then he just walks off. Like, I don't know. I just looked at that, was like, I know it's cherry picking, but it was so unrealistic, and it didn't exactly ruin it for me, but I did find it very amusing.
yeah. Come to think about it, yeah, you're sort of thinking, what was he doing for all that time? Was he just like looking behind every single rock that's down there or something?
Yeah,
Like,
something
not,
like that, or
yeah,
you really fucking deaf soldier.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I have to agree with you on that one.
Hmm.
Okay, there is something that I want to address. I don't know if you spotted this, and I have only spotted the one, but if
Right,
you've spotted
apologies for my
another one,
cat, by the way. But yeah, carry on.
that's cool. Um, I did see what I think could be an Easter egg about a future game in here.
Okay.
Um, so you know when you're in the briefing room and you're sort of
Yep.
allowed to go and walk around, there's this newspaper. I don't know if you picked it up.
Yeah, I did. The one with Bush on it.
That's it, yeah. So obviously the black thing comes across the screen. It has sort of like President Bush, which I suppose could almost distract you from it. But to the right of that, there's this article about a serial killer. And now this is the second time within these games that they've brought up about a serial killer. I think in Little Hope they actually brought up about the Zodiac killer.
Oh yeah, of course they did, didn't they?
So I'm taking that as maybe the next game, or sort of within the next couple of games. I think that the next area of horror that they're going to look at is maybe some sort of slasher or serial killer episode.
Yeah, that would be great. And also, I know you're a big fan of your murder mystery stuff, so I imagine that would be right up your alley, wouldn't it?
It is, yeah. And obviously you've got a little bit of that in Until Dawn with sort of Josh being the psycho, but at the same time it sort of opens up so many questions. You know how he's talking about Heavy Rain
Yeah,
and how one of the playable characters actually ends up being the killer.
yeah, of
They could like,
course.
they could do the same thing. Like they've openly come out and said that they are inspired by like movies, other games, comics, and things like that. Like they could easily do that, and it could be a nice twist in the future. So I'm hoping that's the case. I'm sort of looking forward to see if that is the next one as well.
Definitely. It seems like a good direction for them to take as well, because like I say, my fear with these games is they have the same ending, that they might be a one-trick pony, and that sounds like the kind of game that would really veer them off to say, hey, no, we can do a lot of different stuff. So I'd
Yeah,
be a big fan of that idea, to be honest.
yeah, and I mean I don't know if you're aware of this. I'm pretty sure that it's a given at this point. It might be fake, but the title of the next game has been released. and it's supposedly called The Devil in Me.
All
So
right.
that could that could be a possession story, for example, or it could be like a serial killer, because obviously, like there are killers that will say, "Oh, it wasn't me; it was, this devil or sort of evil force inside me." So, yeah, fingers crossed that all of those strands line up.
Yeah, definitely. It should be interesting to see the trailer. I haven't seen anything for the next one, but yeah, no, I'm hyped to see what's around the corner. So with this game, I don't know if we wanted to wrap up and finish it on theories, unless you had any other point.
No, yeah, I'm very keen to talk about theories, but I'll let you take the floor.
Yeah, so obviously, when we look at other games, for example, Until Dawn, let's take that again. When you go through, you're thinking, oh, it could be the stranger with the flamethrower that's causing everything. It could be ghosts of the sisters haunting you. There's all these different theories, and it should be interesting to see what we think of this one. I'm not sure if this is common knowledge, if this is something I've picked up, or if I'm onto something, I could be completely wrong and I fell for, a false trap. But I have a feeling that war and bloodshed affects the ground and creates the creatures, perhaps, or wakes them up. So the first time we see the creatures is when there's war and it's on a battlefield, and the way the camera pans down, you sort of see the camera go, on the ground, and then the creatures are awoken and come and kill everyone. Uh, and obviously, now the thing that awakes the ground from opening up, it happens at the exact time there's gunfire and the Iraqis and the Americans attack each other.
Right. Okay.
So war and blood almost opens the ground up and awoke these creatures up. Perhaps I could be wrong. I could be right. And it also, another thing is that Jason picks up the pagan stick and pricks his finger, and blood goes on the floor there as well. Now I killed a shepherd with Jason, and I
Yeah.
don't know if these deities and these creatures wake up because of bad blood and bad intentions and all that. But yeah, it's a theory of mine that possibly, evil doing, war, bloodshed wakes the creatures beneath up. So I have a feeling that maybe being nice is the step forward, or causing conflict, is a bad move. I'm unsure, but it's something that caught my eye straight away, and something that I'll be looking at when I, go forward in this game. How about yourself?
Wow, no, I didn't expect that, but there is some merit to that, because it is sort of coincidental that as soon as something begins in terms of a conflict, that things start to unravel. But yeah, okay, well, my theory is to do with the creatures themselves, and a bit of it is to do with where I think the game is ultimately going to go. So again, I don't know if this appears obvious to everybody else, but do you notice how as soon as there was an eclipse and there was no sunlight, the creatures come out and they started attacking everyone? Which you might put down to coincidence at first, but there is a bit later on in the game where Merwin's hanging down and he's in sunlight. He doesn't get attacked. There's a bit where Celine is running away from the bat monster, and it stops just before this bit of sunlight on the ground, and they're just looking at one another, and then obviously something falls down and squashes the monster. So my theory goes is that these creatures do not like sunlight, which
Okay.
for me suggests that, and obviously because they're bat monsters as well, that this could be some sort of vampire inspired thing. Now, I'm not going to say that they are outright vampires. Like, this just might be the developers being inspired by the concept of the vampire, and maybe later on in the game there's something that explains why these things are vampire like. Um, but yeah, I think that's my thoughts at the minute. And there's something interesting as well in terms of the story. When you're walking around the briefing room, there's this board on it, and I'm pretty sure it says that there's an eclipse expected. So I think that towards the end of this game, it's gonna finish with maybe the characters getting up to the surface, and you're thinking, "Oh, thank God, we've made it." The sun's gonna, or the moon's gonna come over the sun, and then it's gonna be chaos again because these creatures can come out and get you. Um, and maybe that's a way where sort of maybe more characters can get killed off, for example. And I think because there's parallels that these developers and writers in general, they like to sort of draw parallels between sort of the beginning and end of a TV show, of a book, or a game, or whatever. I think
Yeah,
we're
of
gonna
course.
I think we're gonna get something similar. But obviously it'll just be, time will tell. Maybe we'll sort of find out later on as to what is creating these things. And I think as well, like when I was walking around the generator room, there was this picture, and I remember seeing this book. Salim's son, he's like studying mythology, right?
Yes, yeah.
And in the book, it said something about that there's seven demons, there's seven gods, like the number seven.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that in this picture, I might be wrong. I think I'm going to have a look at it again before part two. That there's seven people in it, like these archaeologists all sort of banding together for this.
Oh, the Hodgson expedition.
That's it, yeah. And I'm thinking that possibly if it is sort of vampire-esque related, that these all could be like bats, and that this is almost reminiscent of Until Dawn.
Oh,
Like
with the miners,
the
yeah.
Wendigo, like they could be sort of sneakily repeating that again. So yeah, that's where my thinking is at the moment.
Hmm.
It'll be sort of interesting to see where
Do
that
you
goes.
think it's infection based as well when they make them become these bat creatures as well?
Yeah, that's
Because
the thing.
a lot of them aren't killed there, they're dragged off screen.
Yeah, that's it. Like for all we know, they could get dragged off, and then yeah, because they've been bitten into, or it could be something in their blood like a vampire would, and they could morph into these things. Um, which sort of goes back to what I said the other day about that these could be sort of mutated humans, these things.
Yeah, of
Um,
course. It's so
uh,
interesting that we're bashing theories together now because it could be that we get to the final part, we look back at this and cringe because we're talking about vampires and the ground opening up because of hate and bloodshed and
yeah.
infections, and then it turns out that I don't know, Eric bashed his head in that leg accident and it was all in his head again. I don't know, but
Oh God, I hope not. I really hope.
if they do that trick again, I'm quitting. The podcast is over. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
quitting. I'm hanging the boots up.
yeah, yeah. I'd have to agree. But I think contextually as well, obviously the first games, like they've done well, haven't they? They've been okay, but maybe there is some sort of restlessness in the community, sort of with how they've ended, and the developers, they might have looked at Until Dawn and said that was a success. Let's try and replicate that in some way. Which is why you've got, the archaeologists versus the miners. You've got the potential humans becoming monsters theme going on. So yeah, that's what I'm rolling with at the minute. And maybe later on in the game we'll find some sort of infection based thing. And if we do, that's just going to solidify my theory more. But as much as I'd like to be right, a part of me would like to have the rug pulled from under me as well, because I think the best stories do that. Like you think you get one thing and then it ends up being something completely different.
Yeah, and I think that's one strength Little Hope has over Man of Medan, where Man of Medan was pretty predictable and you can get it easily. Little Hope, it came out of nowhere. There was no way I was predicting that with the bus driver. And if House of Ashes comes up with some random thing that neither of us predicted, then fair play. I'm happy to get surprised here.
Yeah, yeah. All right, okay. I mean, is there any other pointers that you can think of? Maybe sort of at the moment, how would you, what sort of score you would give it?
Um, so I'm thinking because it seems like quite a simple game so far, and I quite like that simplicity of it. If it carries on the way it is, it's gunning for a 7. It could easily like wow me even more, become a heavy 8. Um, but it's also got the potential to drop to a 6 or a 5 depending on how it ends. But yeah, I'd say it's got a trajectory of a 7 at the moment. How about yourself?
Yeah, I would say the same. I'm interested to see because there's obviously this backstory of the Hodgson expedition. I imagine there's going to be more rooms and more things that we can find, and there's some puzzling things as well, like the dynamite being strapped to the pillars, and you've got this World War II machine gun down there, and you're like, wow, like what's that down there for? So
Yeah, that
there's
does tie into your theory a little bit because maybe they were trying to destroy the pillars to open the roof to create sun. That's just like a random out there
oh
theory, but it could be that the Hodgsons were onto it, or like the Hodgson expedition even.
yeah, no that yeah, that does make sense actually.
But
Okay.
yeah, there's a lot I'm intrigued by. It'll be interesting to see how the love triangle develops, if Eric and Nick become hostile, how it ties in with Celine coming within the group, if there's going to be hostility there, if they're going to work together. And also, like we said, the creation of the monsters, like what's the origin? Is it in someone's head again? Is it vampires? Is it the product of deities doing this as punishment for like bloodshed and war? There's just so much to it. And also, how the intro ties into it, whether the stuff we did with the guard and the prisoner at the start, if that affects the game, because it'll be interesting if it did. But yeah, we're gonna have to see.
Yeah, because usually the opening it doesn't do too much, does it? I think Man of Medan, like it's the two soldiers, right, and they end up getting killed, and then in
Yeah,
Little Hope, all the family gets killed apart from Anthony, and it's part of the story, but the decisions don't necessarily play out, do they? And I think the curator says, oh, there's nothing you could have done there, so maybe maybe it factors in, maybe it
yeah.
doesn't. So yeah, we'll just have to see.
And also how our stories vary. So me killing the shepherd, me telling Eric with Rachel that there's someone else. Um, I obviously used the Air Force during the raid. You didn't.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I banned smoke grenades from coming to the trip. I said they were unauthorized. I didn't bring them.
Oh, I brought them, but
Oh, see, this is great. We've got so much like variety here. Um,
yeah,
so far, like when you get to the field and you're fighting the Iraqis, Merwin yells out like, "Oh, those grenades would have been really helpful." But that's the only thing that's really come of it so far.
yeah. So in that segment for me, the I had the grenades, and he says, yeah, those grenades, let's use them. And then it comes up with a choice, and it's like, no, then, we can't use them because of some convention, or we can use them as smoke. So I said, no, we can't use them because of the convention. And then
Okay.
Jason actually says, we can only use them as smoke. And in that moment, he then, I don't know if he throws a smoke grenade or something, but he then runs and like flanks the enemy. So maybe that was its purpose the whole time. But
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
again, it come into fruition later on.
yeah. And I'm sure my army brother wouldn't be happy with I'm gonna flank him, and he just jumps over the fence straight at them. And I saw that. I was like, that's not really flanking. I mean, it kind of is, but it's a bit dangerous what you're doing, mate.
Yeah, like even the best cover fire in the world shouldn't really.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah. So just to see if that smoke grenade did affect anything. Did Joe die at that part for you? As
Joe.
in the glasses guy, the desk guy who didn't
Oh
want to be out in the
yeah,
field.
yeah, he died. Yeah,
Yeah, I assume that's a bit that can't be changed.
yeah. I think they introduced them characters in a way to die because that you can't have a squad of what 2 or 3 people. So they've got these other people in there, but they know that ultimately they've got to cut it down to the 5 playable characters. So they just
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
quickly got rid of them in a sort of as efficient way as possible.
Yeah, because at the moment we've got 6 characters down there, so the 5 playable ones and also the Iraqi general. So
Oh, of course, yeah,
I was
yeah,
wandering around.
yeah. I didn't realise he would go down there. It seems a bit strange that you'd rope down there just to kill a few people. Like, why not just let them come back to the surface and you can finish them off? Like, I
Yeah,
don't.
true. Yeah.
But
All
yeah,
right. Okay. Well, you ready to dive into part 2 then?
I am ready to dive into part two.
All right. Brilliant then. So yeah, we'll meet up here for the next part. We'll see how wrong we are. We'll backpedal, see if there's anything we want to change or that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, it's been interesting talking about it. I'm pretty hyped. But yeah, so yeah, I'll see you for the next part then.
Yeah, you too, man. I'm getting a real kick out of this. So yeah, I'm sure we'll be back in a couple of hours chatting about the next part.
All right. Okay, great. I'll see you then.
Okay.